Looking at our world from a theological perspective. This is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, April the 16th, 2024. It is currently 10:26 p.m. Central Time, and I am coming to you live from the Theology Central studio, located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, I know it's a late night broadcast, so like if you were tuning in to AM radio late at night is usually filled with programs about UFOs and the supernatural and the paranormal and conspiracy theories. AM radio is filled with that late at night, right? And it can be some fun, entertaining things if you don't take it too serious, but that's kind of what is usually happening late at night on AM radio. For me, typically when I broadcast late at night, I tend to kind of have a vibe, kind of a different feel. It's usually more devotional. It may be more, kind of basically kind of looking into myself, maybe about emotions, about something along those lines. Just, it has a different vibe. I don't know if I can classify it, but it has a late night feel. But tonight, we're definitely not going AM radio and talking about UFOs, Area 51, ghosts, paranormal, or, EVPs, or all the other things you can listen. I'm referencing the famous program Coast to Coast AM. But if you don't know that, so we're not going to do that. And this is not going to have my typical late night, hey, let's kind of talk about something maybe about depression or about loneliness or about that, something along those lines. No, we're going to just kind of continue what we started earlier today. All right. So if you weren't paying any attention earlier today, right here from the studio, from this very mic, I went live and I read this scripture, Proverbs chapter 20, verse 19. He that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore, meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips. And we did kind of a devotional message on Proverbs 20:19, really to kind of start our day. And in so doing that devotional message, I'm like, okay, guys, I have your assignment, because many of you know that for 2024, we're doing what we are calling the Sermons 2.0 app sermon challenge, where each day you're to just grab a random sermon, as random as possible, from the Sermons 2.0 app and listen, take notes, write down like a one-sentence summary. And by the end of 2024, you should have a notebook filled with all of the sermons that you listen to. And we're hoping that you'll have one for each day of the year. That would be amazing. That would be awesome. And we're doing that because the Sermons 2.0 app, what an amazing resource it has. Like if you were to listen to everything that's on the app, it would take you, I think it's estimated, over 200 years. It has over 200 years of content. If you spent basically most of like 24 hours a day trying to listen to everything. But that means there's a lot of content that you may never find. And you have a tendency to just kind of go, well, these are my favorites and I don't care about them and I don't care about, but I'm trying to get you to listen to anything and everything. So you hear different perspectives, different preachers, different styles, and you may find your favorite new broadcaster, and that will be awesome. So I've been challenging to do that. So when we did this devotional on a talebearer, I'm like, I know what we're going to do this week for the Sermons 2.0 app challenge. You are going to listen to sermons and be searching out sermons about talebearing, about gossip, about slander, about your words, about your mouth, about your tongue. And I made a comment this morning that the one thing that is true of all humans is we have a mouth. And that's where most of our problems began. So many of our problems and conflict is because of what we say. Now, I know it's 2024. Sometimes that means not just our physical mouth. It can mean our fingers as we're tapping out a text or something on social media. And the next thing you know, we find ourselves in conflict, difficulty, because our mouth, our words, our communication gets us into so much trouble. And why? Because, well, that communication arises from where? Inside of us. It comes from inside of us, and it's mixed with our thinking. It's mixed with our feelings. It's mixed with our emotions. And guess what? We have a sinful nature. I know some Christians like to pretend that the sinful nature is gone, but it's still there until glorification. And so therefore, our communication at times is going to have some problems. And not only that, it's being heard by and received by people who are also sinful. So conflict is going to ensue. So I wanted you to just spend the week doing that. And we talked about a little bit about what it is a talebearer. Well, I think we have seen, and I think we've been able to identify a talebearer as someone who reveals secrets. They go about sharing things that they shouldn't be sharing. They're talking about things they shouldn't be talking about. We really kind of focused on that. And guess what? You should not, as Proverbs 20 verse 19 says, let me read it to you again. He that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore, meddle not with him that flattereth with his lips. So here, the idea of flattering with your lips is really the idea of someone who's well, the only way to kind of explain it, it's the Hebrew kind of gives this idea of open and spacious. And it's idea, basically, don't meddle with someone who has a big mouth, who goes around spreading and sharing secrets. Don't do that, because the people who share secrets with you will be the person who will share secrets about you. Don't do that in any way, shape, or form. So we kind of did a good devotional. We set out the challenge. Well, remember when I give out the challenge for the Sermons 2.0 app challenge, I participate in the same challenge. So I'm like, okay, I've got to choose a random sermon on talebearing or on gossip or slander or my speech or mouth or tongue, using those kinds of key words. Well, I looked up talebearer, and that led me to the following sermon. It led me to a sermon entitled The Cure for Talebearing. And I'm like, ooh, I want to hear the cure of this. I want to hear the cure. Now, this sermon is called The Cure of Talebearing, for Talebearing. It's a series on the Heidelberg Catechism. That really was fascinating because I love the Heidelberg Catechism. Everyone should study the Heidelberg Catechism. Everyone should own 4 or 5 copies of the Heidelberg Catechism because I love the Catechism. Do I agree with everything in it? No, but I think it's it's like a systematic theology put in a catechism form. And catechisms are great for learning systematic theology, especially those who follow the ancient pattern of a question and answer form. And I think that that's awesome, all right? So it's a part of the Heidelberg Catechism series that caught my attention. It's called The Cure for Talebearing, and it's by Pastor Corey. Now, it is spelled Griess. Griess. I wasn't sure. I was about 100% sure. Well, I wasn't sure how to say it. I was 100% sure that I was going to say it incorrectly. But someone emailed me and said it's pronounced Grease. And I'm like, okay, I can do that. Pastor Corey Grease. So Pastor Corey Grease, The Cure for Talebearing, please look it up on the Sermons 2.0 app. Please download it. Please do that. Now, and remember, when I'm participating, what do? I grab a random sermon and then I play it. And we analyze it and critique it and review it. Sometimes I agree. Sometimes I disagree. It's not about, being critical. It's about I'm listening to a sermon and I'm inviting you to, listen in. So we started listening to that and I did a review of it. It's called Talebearing Part 1. You can find it on the Sermons 2.0 app, the Church One app. And all podcast apps. You just name the podcast app. It'll be there. So Talebearing Part 1. Now, in Part 1, as we reviewed this sermon, a couple of interesting things happened. Number one, he made the comment that there are 2 Hebrew words that are translated talebearer. Actually, I know of at least 3, and I demonstrated that in the review. There are 3 Hebrew words that are translated talebearer, some variation of it. And I think that was somewhat helpful because you can take those 3 Hebrew words and I think you can get an idea a little bit about talebearing. Now, I think the text in English clearly reveals what talebearing is. It is revealing secrets. Now, I think when you look up the Hebrew definition of those 3 Hebrew words, you get the idea that it's telling secrets, and you may do so whispering. You may do so to slander. You may do so to in a murmuring type of way. There's all these additional information about how you're revealing those secrets or what you're doing in revealing those secrets. So that was the first thing. He said there was 2 Hebrew words. I know of at least 3, and I gave you those 3 Hebrew words. All right. The next thing he did was kind of interesting. He connected bearing false witness with talebearing. So in a roundabout way, he kind of said, basically, talebearing is bearing false witness, that it's going around telling people lies or misinformation about people. And now he kind of opened it that it doesn't have to always be lying, but he kept clearly, I mean, the whole sermon, the cure for talebearing, is really about the commandment to not bear false witness. So even though he maybe not explicitly was trying to draw that correlation, it's clearly implied. Well, I disagree. I think bearing false witness is sharing false information, and you can do so to slander, gossip, murmur, backbite. And I believe talebearing is you are gossiping, slandering, backbiting, but you're doing so by just revealing secrets. I think talebearing, you're sharing things that may be true, but you're doing so to hurt, to damage. You have, very sinful motives in what you're doing, and you're hurting people. Even though you may say, well, it's true. Yeah, it may be true, but should you be sharing it? Should you be doing that? Because you're supposed to love people, and love covers a multitude of sins, and you're supposed to even love your enemy. Right? Now, I'm not saying you keep a illegal activity secret, but there's a time and place to talk, and there's a time that it's nobody else's business. So I believe bearing false witness is the lying part, and talebearing is telling secrets. So I drew that distinction. So the first thing he did, he said it was 2 Hebrew words, and I believe it's 3. Well, I don't believe it's 3. I know it's at a minimum 3. Maybe there's more, but I gave you 3. Second, he kind of drew a connection between bearing false witness and talebearing, and I believe that he kind of brought them together. I'm separating them completely. And then number 3, he did a very interesting thing. He said, if you want to know what talebearing is, it's kind of really defined in a very good way in 1 Timothy chapter 5. 1 Timothy chapter 5, where we read this verse, 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 13. And withal, they learn to be idle, wandering about from house to house, and not only idle, but tattlers, and also busybodies, speaking things which they ought not. Now that's a power. Now a lot of people will just focus that on women, but it can be anyone. You become idle. You become a busybody. You're a tattler. You just keep sharing and talking about other people and sharing information, and that is wrong. And so we need to look to ourselves. First, we don't need to meddle or become connected to people who are constantly talebearing, because we'll get pulled into it and we'll participate. Second, we need to ensure and check ourselves to see how much of a talebearer we are. So we did all of that. Now, what we're going to do in this late hour is that same sermon, The Cure for Talebearing. I continued to listen after I stopped broadcasting, and I got to a point where he's going to give like 4 things about talebearing. 4 things. And so, you know what we're going to do? We're going to review. I don't know. I don't think we'll be able to review all 4, because 5 minutes of audio can be 45 minutes of commentary for me. But we're going to at least try to get 1 or 2 at this late hour and try to just wrap up today. All of the broadcasting we've already done today, kind of wrap it up by doing a little bit more work on talebearing. And then tomorrow we can pick it up and we can continue on our discussion all of this week about words and our tongue and our speech. And I really want you to just think about how many times your words, you end up in a fight and an argument with people. And it usually starts with something that was said. Right? And even if the initial thing was an action, typically the reason the argument or the fight becomes more intense is because of words. So I think it's a very important concept to consider. But I really want to get to what he believes the cure is. I don't know if we'll get to that. We're not going to get to that tonight, but we'll see. But here he's going to give us 4 things about talebearing. Again, this comes from a sermon called The Cure for Talebearing. A series is the Heidelberg Catechism, and this is Pastor Corey Grease. It was published on August the 21st, 2016 please go listen to it. Please download it. Think of a music streaming service that tries to give you, music discovery, help you. This is the Sermons 2.0 discovery program where I try to help you find new broadcasters and new sermons and new things to listen to. But at the same time, I'm listening with you, and then we get to review and critique, and maybe we agree, maybe we disagree, maybe we have no clue what's going on. But you know what? You get to hear different perspectives, and hopefully you benefit from this. But here we go.
4 ways in the book of Proverbs, specifically, that the use of words in this evil way destroys fellowship, attacks the covenant of grace, in the sin of talebearing. First of all, it damages or all out ruins my closest friendships.
Talebearing. Number one, talebearing damages or completely ruins friendships. Talebearing will completely destroy friendships, will completely destroy relationships. And sometimes you can talebear and you don't even think about it. I'll give you an example. All right. So I was in the United States military. And obviously in the United States military, especially in the medical world, a lot of the people we work with are civilian employees. Many of them are those who were in the military, they're retired. Now they're a civilian employee. Maybe they're working as a nurse. Maybe they're working in referral management. Maybe they're working in, TRICARE. Well, all the different possible places you could work. And I worked with this one gentleman, and I won't say we were great friends, but we did a lot of things together. Sometimes we would drive to Dallas to go to concerts together, and he worked in one office, and then I worked in the office right next to it. And in his office, there was 5 or 6 cubicles and people there. And in my office had 5 or 6 people there. And so, because I went to concerts with him, and sometimes, 2-3 hour drive from where I live to wherever we're going to a concert, 4 hours, wherever. And we went to a number of concerts together. Obviously, those 3 or 4 hour drives, you have long conversations. Well, he talked about some crazy things he had done when he was younger, right? I can't remember. He was older than me. So I guess in the 70s, he was like a teenager, I guess, maybe. I don't know. But his wild times in the 70s, maybe early 80s. I don't remember the exact year. So he was making some joke, and he was mentioning, that there was a time in his life that, let's just say he partook in, smoking marijuana. Okay. Let's just say it that way. Right. So he's a civilian employee. So it's not like, I'm going to get him in some kind of trouble. He's talking about something he did in the 70s or 80s, not something he's doing now. But he came in and he was giving me a hard time about something like, hey, you messed this up, you messed that, or whatever he did, was giving me a hard time. Well, I didn't even think about it, right? Like he had told me these things about his past. I guess it was somewhat in confidence, but I didn't really just connect it. So what I did was, he's giving me a hard time, and I'm really quick to come back at someone, right? If someone picks on me or messes with me, I can come back fast, right? I can come back fast. And sometimes my joking can be, let's just say I don't always know how to control. I can come back. Sometimes I can go for the throat, and and I'm doing it in a joking way, but it can really offend people. So I said something like, man, what are you talking about? You've smoked enough weed. You wouldn't know if what I'm doing is right or wrong. So take your druggy self back to your desk or something along that line. And he walked away, and about 30 minutes later, I got a phone call, and he was not happy with me. Now that's a case where, in a sense, because there were all these people heard what I said. Now, I don't think anyone took me serious. I think everyone was like, that's ridiculous. But he was offended by that. And he had every right to be offended. He had every right, because I'm sitting there blabbing what he kind of revealed to me in confidence. And I didn't really think about it at the time. I thought he was just telling funny stories about his past. But it was still in confidence. We were alone in a car driving to a concert. And to this day, I feel horrible about what I did. Now, I apologize, and he was cool. And we went to, I think we went to another concert even after that. And hopefully he forgave me. Hopefully he did. I felt really, 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 really bad, because I try to be I typically am very good at not, if someone tells me something, I don't tell anyone. I don't speak a word of it. I mean, I don't say anything. So I'm usually extremely good at that, like crazy good. Like nobody will know. And someone will tell me something and say, well, they know now and I'm like, no, nobody knows because I would never say anything. But in this particular case, I didn't see it. So in a roundabout way, that's kind of a form of talebearing. And it almost destroyed a relationship. Now, it wasn't intentional. Now, I think talebearing is much more designed to be intentional, but that's an idea of it. You're revealing something, a secret. Now, I wasn't doing it to hurt or to destroy. Now, I was doing it in a way to try to get back at someone and making a joke, but it's damaging. It's destructive. Talebearing can just literally destroy something. And I'm just going to go ahead and say this. I'm going to tick off some parents. All right. When it comes to talebearing, I think parents need to hear this. What happens in your home? Your home should be a very safe place. Because your home is made up of people who are sinners. And they're going to do things. And they're going to mess up. And they're going to say things. They're going to do things wrong. They're going to do stupid things. They're going to do foolish things. They're going to embarrass themselves. They're going to humiliate themselves. Your kids are going to do things that irritate you, that aggravate you, that make you mad. And you're going to get bothered about it. You know what you do for the people in your home? I'm not saying cover up illegal activities if you're being abused or hurt. I'm not saying that. I'm saying everything other than you being abused or hurt or something horrible happening, you keep that to yourself. You don't hop on the phone with your friend and go, you know what my kid just did? Oh, so-and-so. Oh, she's got a boyfriend now, and you're not going to believe. Shh. Be very careful. Because you want your kid to feel safe, that they can tell you anything, and that their mistakes and their whatever they're going through, that it's top secret. You want your kids to feel that safety, not you on the phone griping about them. Oh, they got this boyfriend and I can't stand him. He's a jerk. And I don't know what well, just imagine if they walked in and heard you saying those things. They would be devastated and they would never trust you again. They would never trust you again in any way, shape, or form. Same thing. Wives should not do that to their husbands. You don't hop on the phone with your girlfriend and go, hey, my husband, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. No, you don't. And husbands shouldn't be at work going, man, the old lady riding my case. Stop it. You're telling secrets. You're being a talebearer. What happens in the home? It should be a sanctuary where there's safety there to make mistakes and mess up and be a kid and be a teenager. And now I'm not saying, obviously, if you need to seek counsel, like with someone, then you're seeking and you're seeking counsel in somewhat of a professional kind of way. You're not like telling your girlfriend who's then going to tell her husband, and then they're all going to look at your husband or kid differently when they see him at church. Come on now. I'm talking if you're seeking a counsel from someone, then okay. You got to be very careful because it can destroy friendships. It can destroy relationships in your home. So we got to be careful with that. And so many times I've seen parents do that. They'll just be tearing their kids to shred, just telling their kids' business to anyone and everyone. And usually I kind of want to walk up and kind of go, hey, maybe you shouldn't be telling your kids' business. Maybe it's nobody's business. Now, typically people get offended when I do that. And I'm talking of, when you're sharing things you know you shouldn't share, things you know that would hurt them. Come on. So don't take what I'm saying too far, but take it far enough. You know when your kid would walk into the room going, who are you talking to? And what are you telling them? You're telling them I just flunked my math test? You know what would hurt them. You know what would destroy your husband or destroy your wife if they heard you. You know that. So I think we all know not to do that. We probably, I know I've messed up. I know I probably have failed. You have probably failed. Pastors sometimes do this when they're giving illustrations about their family. And I know I've made that mistake. You're just thinking about, oh, this was a fun. Hey, yesterday my daughter walked in and she said this. Now you thinking it's funny, but they will maybe like, how dare you do that to me? How dare you? And you got to go, oh, you were so right. You were so right. So I agree. Talebearing can just utterly destroy things. Well, I think he's getting ready to head to Proverbs chapter 11.
In the kingdom and covenant of God. Proverbs 11, verse 13, a talebearer revealeth secrets, but he that is of a faithful spirit concealeth the matter. A faithful friend conceals the thing, but a talebearer lets it out. And the point is, the talebearer then is not a faithful spirit. He is unfaithful. He is an unfaithful friend, and therefore damages the friendship and the union and fellowship in the covenant of grace. Proverbs 20, verse 19, he that goeth about as a talebearer revealeth secrets. Therefore, meddle not with him that opens his lips. Don't be a close friend of someone who is a talebearer, the Bible says. Talebearing, gossip, spreading things around, betrays the very heart of friendship. You don't want to be a close friend with that person. Nature of friendship.
Please note that in both of those verses, in Proverbs 11 and Proverbs 20, it clearly tells you what a talebearer is. It revealeth secrets. And in both cases, I'm going back to our previous discussion about how earlier in his sermon he connected bearing false witness with it. This is not revealing untrue secrets. This is revealing true secrets. A faithful friend would not do that. And you're not even to do that to your enemy. You know why? Because you're supposed to love your enemy. You conceal a matter. This is not concealing illegal activities. This is not saying that there's never a time to confront that person, or we know that within church discipline you may have to bring 2 or 3 witnesses, but you're trying to bring people who already know about the situation. So you've got to be careful what you reveal, because you are not being faithful. You're not showing love. You're not being a friend. You're destroying people.
That a person says, I take you into my confidence because you are my friend. And I open up to you something. And I expect, without even having to say it, because you are my friend, that you will handle this information in a way that loves me, in a way that protects me, that is good for me. If it's good for me to say it, then say it. Out of love for me. And then that one doesn't do that. Instead, handles the information in a way that hurts, ruins fellowship. There are people who don't have any close fellowship. There may be a variety of reasons for that. But one ought to examine their hearts. If it's because they are commonly guilty of the sin of talebearing, divides, ruins close friendships.
Sometimes people may not have close friends because they're the talebearer. Sometimes you don't have close friends because you've been the victim of talebearing, okay? Sometimes you've been the victim of it way too many times. Sometimes you get that phone call, especially as a pastor. So-and-so was saying this and so-and-so was saying that. Well, why are you telling me what they were telling? I don't want to know. And why are those other people talking about me? Oh, and sometimes you know what? The best thing to do is me, myself, and I, we are safe and we are secure and I can say whatever I want. And me, myself, and I, we're not going to hurt we can trust one another, right? But when you can find someone you can trust, oh, that's a great thing. But the sad part is sometimes you can trust someone until something goes wrong. And then once you hurt them, once you let them down, once they're done with you, then they will take their combined knowledge of everything about you and then destroy you. And that's a scary thing, right? It's a scary thing. It is. So I think just because someone doesn't have friends doesn't mean they're the talebearer. It may mean they're the victim of it. And you only have to be a victim of it a couple of times before you're kind of like, I'm moving to the land of no one. And it's just going to be me, myself, and I, and we will never have a problem. We will get along just fine. So I think it can go two ways.
Second,
all right, he's going to offer number two, but we're not going to do that. We're not going to do that. We're just going to start with that. We're just going to stop with that one right tonight. We're going to stop with that one. Talebearing. It absolutely destroys, hurts, and ruins friendships. It will destroy and hurt relationships. Either you have been, it probably goes both ways. You have probably been hurt, damaged, and scarred by talebearing. Or, and not very likely, you have also hurt and damaged and destroyed others by talebearing. Now, you may say, well, I didn't hurt anyone because that person never found out. You're still hurting that person. Even though they may never know that you told 15 different people their secrets. Even if it never gets back to them, you're still damaging their reputation and who they are in the eyes of other people. People have probably said so many things about me. You know what? Whether I know it or not, it still has done damage and destruction to me. And that's perfectly okay. If people want to damage and destroy me, I mean, I guess it's perfectly okay because the end result is they may feel all self-righteous, but they are committing the sin of talebearing and they are wrong. But I know I have done it and I know I have been the victim of it. And both are horrible. Doing it is horrible and being the victim of it is horrible. So we have to try to fix our talebearing. Now, let's make this very clear. This is law. And when we talk about our mouth and the correct use of the mouth and the correct use of speech, we are going to constantly find ourselves falling short because we cannot keep the law. We will never keep the law perfectly, right? Even as Christians, we cannot keep the law. The law is always there to reveal our inability to keep it. So this condemns us. Doesn't mean we just give up not trying. It just means that we realize I've fallen short. I must continue to press forward, but I fall short. And your only true hope is in Jesus Christ. That's why we are saved by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone. We are saved by an imputed righteousness, meaning a righteousness accredited to our account, not an infused righteousness. So we are declared to be righteous, even though we are not. And you know how? Christ was not a talebearer. Christ knew how to control his tongue while he was God in the flesh. And his obedience to the law about not bearing false witness and not being a talebearer, guess what? His obedience to that law is imputed or accredited in my account. So in Christ, I'm not a talebearer. I can rest in that tonight. I can find comfort. In practice, I'm very much guilty in how I use my words. So we find comfort in what we are positionally, but we continue to strive and try to be motivated to be better in our practical lives because we fall so short of it. Talebearing literally destroys relationships. Talebearing destroys families. Talebearing destroys marriages. It destroys relationships with children. It destroys relationship with parents. It destroys churches. May God convict us of this very important concept. Tomorrow, we'll continue and we'll listen to the next three things that he gives us about talebearing. Hopefully you'll meditate on this. And as you continue this week looking up different sermons on this subject, share what you're learning. Share what you're seeing. Give me your thoughts because I love to hear them. newsif@yahoo.com. newsif@yahoo.com. The one thing all humans have in common, we have a mouth. That's where most of our problems begin, and how we use it, the words we say, how we say, what we say. And it's something we should all be convicted about. God bless.